Tom Campbell here. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Okay, good afternoon, Tom. We're continuing on with some MBT Events email questions. This is in addition to our fireside chat addendum. Sometimes we'll include one of those, but today they're just emails to MBT Events. The first question is, do you ever get to meet the source during your process of enlightenment?
Well, if you want to, or if it's on your way to, evolving the quality of your consciousness, if it's something on your path that would really help you understand, then yes. And eventually you will, in any case. So I think if you stick with this long enough, then certainly you and the source will connect in a way that is a very profound experience. Sometimes people who have near-death experiences have that same connection. When they have their near-death experience and find themselves no longer in their bodies, they will see a white light, and they go to the light, and then they become integrated with that light. They're just subsumed into it. And that often is a similar thing. That's meeting the source. That's, you become aware that you are everything, that you are one with everything, that you are love, that the source is love. And it's a very profound thing to have. Now, if it's something that you'd like to experience, then you can have that intention with the source, that you would like to get to meet the source. You would like to get to experience, is a better word than meet, to experience the source's viewpoint, see things kind of the way the source sees things. And if source thinks that that is on your way to growing up, then it will no doubt give you that experience. So yes, it's a common experience for those who are serious in their, desire to evolve and to grow. So whether you ask for it or not, you'll probably receive it anyway if you stay with the process long enough and continuing to grow. But if you particularly want to have it, then asking for it is often the way you get it. You just want to get, connected, a personal experience with the source, and have that as your intent, and see, it might happen, might not. Depends on whether the source thinks you're ready for that would be a good thing for you to experience. It is a very profound thing, and it will change you. Few people are the same afterwards. So it isn't something that you would just do every day because it was fun. It's a very special connection.
All right, thank you. And the next question is a personal relationship with the source necessary, or is it a goal for your enlightenment?
It's not necessary. Could be a goal if it's something you wanted, but it doesn't really have to be a goal. As I just said, if you're serious and you work long enough at increasing the quality of your consciousness, you will just one day probably have that. Many people do. And I just, from my experience, the people who have been trying to improve themselves for a long term, most of those have had this experience. So it is a normal and natural experience to have eventually when you're ready for it. But no, it's not necessary. You can grow up without that. It's not a necessary ingredient. It's just an experience where you totally lose your own identity. You totally lose your own sense of self and become one with everything. And you feel like a tiny piece of something much bigger than you And that's something that's much bigger than you, is total love and acceptance. But you also feel not only very small and very humble, but you also feel a part of everything at the same time, that you are integrated and connected to everything, everyone. So that's basically the sort of experience it is, but it's not necessary. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a goal. It just happens when it happens, if it happens.
All right, thank you. The next question is, I left a religious organization 15 years ago where I was born into and grew up with, and they teach that they are the only channel of God's message. And they teach that any kind of channeling or out-of-body experience as contacting demons. So even after leaving this organization, I was reluctant to explore that area until this year, and I'm getting all kinds of good information. So I have a hard time forgiving that type of mind-controlling sect, where I am glad I managed to get, out of that brainwashing environment. I often wonder about why people allow themselves to be bound by this kind of philosophy, so much so, even though they don't necessarily feel satisfaction with their belief. I wonder if they are young souls.
Well, probably yes, on average. They probably are a little younger souls. In that sense, I say younger, just not in the sense of chronological age, but in the sense of experience and growing up. And, they're still probably on the front end of their journey to become love. But it's not so much that is a part of it, as it is that it's a matter of belief. As you say, you're brought up into some religious tradition. And when you're brought up into it, that means you're introduced to it as a child. Children are extremely impressionable, and they take on things as absolute truth. They don't question, because this is just the way it is. And often they're brought to some sort of organized religion like that by their parents, who also don't question, because that's the way it was when they were children. So it just gets passed along. And as a child, you accept it. But if you are an older soul, in your terminology, or one that has evolved its quality a little more, then you're more likely to sometime further along in your life go, I'm not so sure all this dogma is necessary. I'm not so sure that the dogma is necessary to being love, being good, being kind, being helpful, being cooperative. I can be all those things without the dogma. So how important is this dogma anyway, if it's not really about who I am and how I am and the quality of me, then what's it about? So, and a soul that's more developed in its evolution will ask those questions eventually, and one that is not probably won't. So that's, so I say there may be something there. But other times, people who are older souls are in a tradition like that, and basically what they do is they stay with the tradition, but they just give up the dogma. They continue to attend, they continue to support, they continue to be a part of that tradition, but the dogma no longer appeals to them. And though the dogma is being talked about, they just sort of ignore it as not really all that pertinent. And that's okay too. So now, so just because you're an older soul doesn't mean that you're likely to leave religion. You may just stay in it, but let the dogma go. And I've known any number of people who are in that, that particular boat, where they feel comfortable in that tradition, because really that was where their family was. And when they were younger, they were very committed to it. And then they're still committed to it, but they don't take it as seriously as they used to. But they take their own morality, their own ethics, their own kindness, their own growing to become love. They take that very seriously. So you can be among those that disagree with you, and you don't have to always argue. You can just let them be the way they are. And that's what these people do. They don't try to argue or make a point or convince anybody. They just let people be how they are, and they are how they are. And if they think that how they are would upset other people, well, then they just keep it to themselves. They don't have to, they don't have to argue about it. They're content just to be who they are and to let others be who they are. So that's another solution.
That's a good way to be. Our next question. In your lectures, you mentioned that there are fearful or less evolved than average non-physical consciousness too. I thought that in non-physical world, there's a lower entropy. Is that something I misunderstood then?
Yes, that's something you misunderstood. There's only one thing that's fundamental, and that's consciousness. Everything else is virtual. So when you're in the non-physical, you're just in some other virtual reality. So when you go out of body, say, you just go into another virtual reality. When you dream, you're just in a different virtual reality. When you die, you become aware that you're still existing in another virtual reality. These are all virtual realities. And in these virtual realities, there are entities who are perhaps very highly evolved and some who are very lowly evolved, some that hardly evolved at all. Sometimes in the non-physical, what we call non-physical really means just not here. When we say we go into the non-physical, we just mean we go out of this virtual reality. And then we go into some other virtual reality. And there are some virtual realities where some of the entities are what we call elementals. They're not only not very highly evolved, they're just barely sentient. They are kind of the bottom of on the bottom rung of the ladder of consciousness evolution, just barely sentient. So you have all sorts of beings in all sorts of these realities. So just because you're not in this reality doesn't mean that person you run into, is a guru and knows a lot more than you do and is a much higher quality than you are. It doesn't mean that at all. So yes, that's a point that you may have missed. A lot of people feel that way. Oh, this is the very dense place here on this earth. This is where all the dense people are. And, once you get to the non-physical, then everybody's a lot wiser. But you don't become wise. You don't evolve just because you die. Dying doesn't give you a step forward. It's not like every time you pass go, you collect $200. Like every time you die, you take a step up. All the step ups you take are because you've earned them. It's because you've made good choices. Because you've shown the right stuff. And that's how you evolve. Just dying doesn't earn you any credit. So yes, there's all kinds of levels of evolution in most virtual realities.
Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.